Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and today we're back at it with another spoiler season video for Magic the Gathering's Final Fantasy expansion. This one is going to cover all of the Day 13 spoilers, everything that dropped on Friday. And there aren't a ton of cards, but the cards that we did get look absolutely insane. So I'm excited to dive right in. Before we do, please like the video. It helps me get it out to so many more people. And subscribe if you're new so you never miss an upload, because I have a ton of content on the way. Not only spoiler content, but also some pretty crazy deck techs I've been hanging on to. And early access is coming up. I will be streaming for 24 hours playing Final Fantasy as a set within Magic the Gathering Arena days before it's available to the public. If you're interested in seeing that, or maybe suggesting decks that I should build that you'd like to see, definitely look forward to more info about that coming soon. But let's dive right in here. First of all, we've got Overkill. This is another one of the cards that we saw leaked a few weeks ago in the starter kit, but now we have the official card here. This is an instant for 1 black and 2. Target creature gets -0, -9,999 until end of turn. That's a little overkill, I guess, but no pun intended, honestly. It is very useful. You don't need the full, like, 10,000, -10,000 to make this card good, but it is worth noting that it's instant speed, it gets around indestructible, because it gives minus whatever toughness they have. Even if you use some kind of crazy combo to make an insane amount of toughness on one creature, this is going to kill it. Even if that creature has indestructible, it's going to kill it. So it's not like the -9,999 is worthless. It is a little bit overboard, but it is going to be actually valuable in play. And it's a pretty interesting card. I like that it's instant speed. It'll definitely be a very high pick piece of removal in Limited because, like I said, it can kill anything at instant speed, it can get around indestructible, it's going to be very sought after. Next up, we've got Ultros Obnoxious Octopus, a 2/1 legendary creature octopus for 1 blue and 1. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And then whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 8 mana was spent to cast it, you put 8 +1/+1 counters on Ultros. What I love about Ultros the most is the fact that if you do cast a non-creature spell that costs 8 or more, it's not only going to trigger the second ability, it's still going to trigger the 4 or more ability as well, which means you're putting 8 +1/+1 counters on Ultros and tapping down a creature and putting a stun counter on it. Which is kinda nuts. This thing becomes a 10/9. Their best blocker is out of the way for multiple turns, and you're probably just closing out the game. It's also worth noting that it is an octopus, and we've seen a few different cards that are standard legal, one of which is even in the Final Fantasy set, that work with Octopus Tribal. So Summon Leviathan is a good example. That is a summon card coming in this set that one of the lore abilities, when it triggers, bounces everything, all creatures to hands that aren't of 5 different creature types that are all different sea creature types like Leviathans and Merfolk and stuff like that. But one of the ones that it doesn't bounce is Octopus. So you could see the start of a weird, I don't know if it'll be an Octopus tribal deck or if it'll just be like a few different tribes mashed together, like a Merfolk tribal deck with Ultros and Leviathan. But there's definitely potential for some kind of crazy tribal shenanigans with Ultros. And I kind of just love everything about the card. This is one of the uncommons we've seen that I'm pretty sure will make the cut in Standard. I don't know if the deck you want to put it in will end up being really good. I don't know if it'll end up being a tier 1 deck. But the very specific deck you would want to build in Standard that would, build around this card would absolutely use this card, and it would be good enough for that deck. So that's interesting, but it's also just really good in Limited, right? Getting all this free extra value, tapping things down, putting stun counters, and then turning this into a game-ending threat later on is all really, really good, especially when you consider the fact that you can just play this on 2 and then trade it for their 2 toughness creature, and that's not the worst thing ever easy. So you're kind of getting access to all of this extra value, not at very much opportunity cost. I guess there is some, because most of the 2-drops are going to be better on turn 2 and turn 3 than this guy. But the fact that he scales up makes him really, really good. And in the meantime, he can still trade. It's not like he's stuck in your hand until you can cast 4 mana spells or 8 mana spells. Like, he's still board presence early that you can take advantage of. Next up, we've got Ride the Shoopuf. Wait a minute. Before we move on, I do want to point out how much I love Ultros and how excited I am that they actually made an Ultros card. One of the most ridiculous off-the-wall characters from Final Fantasy VI. This was the one guy that I was thinking in my head when they announced this set. I was like, I wonder if they'll go that deep and make an Ultros, and they absolutely did it, and I think it's just awesome. But let's move on to Ride the Shoopuf, an enchantment for 1 green and 1. It has a landfall ability. Whenever a land you control enters, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And then it also has an activated ability for 2 green and 5. This enchantment becomes a 7/7 beast creature in addition to its other types. I absolutely love this card. It's going to be great in limited. An important thing to note is we do have a card that does this in standard right now in creature form, which is Bristly Bill. The difference here is they can't kill Ride the Shoopuf with creature removal. So even though in ways Bristly Bill is better, it gives you board presence itself that you don't have to wait until you have 7 mana to utilize. The fact that you get to turn on this landfall trigger that gives you counters without being susceptible to creature removal to get rid of it actually seems really good, especially when you take into account the fact that this set does seem to incorporate a lot of landfall shenanigans and a lot of different ways of ramping out land in order to trigger those shenanigans. So an ability like this, a landfall ability, gets even better in a set like this. So I actually think this card is really good. And the fact that it isn't board presence itself sort of gets canceled out by the fact that if you can just keep the game alive until you get to 7 mana, it actually does become a huge threat that your opponent has to deal with. But if they're wasting their removal on killing your 7/7 that you already got a bunch of +1/+1 counters on, you're kind of up on tempo. You're up on card advantage that way. So it just feels really good all around. My only worry in limited is if it ends up being a little bit too slow, since it isn't a body itself. Your opponent could take advantage of the fact that you maybe like took a turn off or half a turn off depending on when you play this, and maybe get ahead on tempo that way. So I'm not 100% sure that it's going to be amazing in limited, but I absolutely think it's worth trying. I think it has a chance of being really good in that format. And I for sure think that if there's a landfall deck in standard, this is absolutely worth trying. I don't know if it makes the cut because standard is so pushed and so power crept that there might just be better cards. But a card like this is absolutely at least worth trying out. Next up, we've got Sleep Magic, 1 blue for an enchantment aura. It enchants a creature, and when it enters, you tap Enchanted Creature. Enchanted Creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and when Enchanted Creature is dealt damage, you have to sacrifice this aura. So, we've seen auras like this in the past. Not anything crazy to write home about, but it is an interesting way of having very cheap removal in blue, specifically for limited. For only 1 blue mana, this is actually pretty good. The fact that it taps it when it does enter, is even better. I'm not sure if we've seen one that costs this cheap, that both taps and doesn't allow the creature to untap on the same card for only 1 mana. I think this might be, correct me in the comments, but I think this might be the first time we've seen that ability, like both of those abilities on the same card for just 1 mana. And if that's the case, then that's probably offset by that last line of text, when Enchanted Creature is dealt damage, sacrifice it. So you could theoretically use like your shock on your own 3 toughness creature or 4 toughness creature to just deal damage to it to remove the sleep magic. And that's an interesting downside. It does make your opponent have to waste a card either way, so you get the tempo advantage of getting to tap down their creature, keep it tapped down for a few turns, and then if they eventually do draw into their shock or whatever, they still have to use up a card to get rid of the sleep magic. So if you 1-for-1 your sleep magic for their burn spell, and also got a bunch of tempo advantage off whatever turns the creature was tapped down. So even after all of that, I still feel like it's pretty good, even if they end up removing the sleep magic. The one real downside to it is fight spells. Fight spells are going to be a really good way of getting rid of the sleep magic and potentially killing your opponent's creature so that you're not at a card disadvantage to just get rid of the sleep magic. And I do think that this will probably be one of the key pieces of removal in Limited for blue, and that makes fight spells in this set in Limited that much more important. And we saw like one of the best fight spells yesterday, Clash of the Icons, that does a whole lot more in addition to fighting for just 1 mana. So this card existing makes me think that that card's going to be even more sought after in Limited. Honestly, the more and more I think about it, I think that card is going to be the #1, like, pack one, pick one card from the common and uncommon pool in this set. But Sleep Magic, pretty good. Next up, we've got Cargo Ship, a 2/3 flying vigilance vehicle for 1 blue and 1, and you can tap it to add a colorless mana, but spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source. It also crews for just 1 mana. This card's absolutely nuts in Limited. I love this. Just any creature, even the hero tokens that you're making, can crew this. You can swing in for 2 in the air with evasion, still have it as a blocker on your opponent's turn. You just have to crew it with a little crappy guy again. And you can swing in with Vigilance, and then afterwards in your second main phase, use it for mana to ramp out an artifact or to use artifact abilities. So there's a lot of versatility in what this card can do, and it makes sense that they're including some really impressive uncommon vehicles to sort of allow for that type of archetype within Limited, since we have seen a couple of rare cards that, you know, hedge pretty heavily on having vehicles in your deck. This card's awesome. It makes me wonder if maybe it might even be good enough for standard artifact decks, because it's just like a 2 mana, it's like a 2 mana mana rock in standard artifact decks, except you also have this extra, you know, silver lining value of potentially using it as a vehicle as well. So this might actually make the cut in standard, which would be nuts, but it's going to be really good in Limited either way. Next up, we've got Black Waltz #3, which I believe is the last uncommon of the day. This is a 2/2 legendary wizard for 4 mana in the colors of Rakdos. It has flying, it has death touch, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, he deals 2 damage to each opponent. I absolutely love this card. First of all, this is one of the most iconic, memorable boss fights from Final Fantasy IX. They sort of look like Vivi, but they're not Vivi. There's 3 of them. They've got these crazy angelic wings, but they look very like demonic and shadowy. Just such a cool, iconic villain. I remember the airship chase scene from that game, and that scene and the scene containing these villains really stood out in my head over the years as something that I remember super fondly. So seeing this creature in particular get a card is super awesome. It's important to note that it counts as a wizard, so it fits into your like wizard tribal decks. That seems to be a thing with like the new Kuja and all of the wizard tokens that deal 1 damage when you cast a non-creature. This is just like the amped up version of that, dealing 2 damage for every non-creature that you play. And it hits each opponent, so that makes it even better for Commander and other multiplayer formats as well. Just everything about this card is awesome. Like, if they don't have a flyer, it can get in for 2 and deal an extra 2 when you cast a non-creature. Even if they do have flyers, it can sit back and be the ultimate blocker, where if they do have a bomb that's going to just take over the game, you can just block and kill it, makes them not want to attack you. But at the same time, if they don't get rid of this guy, you're just triggering that 2 damage constantly all the time. Even the pumpkin's excited. Huh, Pumpkin? Even she likes Black Waltz #3. You came to say hello? You came to say hello to the... You came to say hello to everybody? Are you sleepy? Anyway, Black Waltz #3 is awesome. One last thing I want to point out about this card is the fact that you don't have to cast instants and sorceries to take advantage of this card. Non-creature spells means you could play this in like an artifact deck and still get a ton of value out of it. You could play it in an enchantment deck or even a battle deck and still get tons of triggers off this, in addition to, you know, triggers off potentially other wizard tokens that you make as well. I really think Wizard Tribal is going to be a thing. I don't know if this card in particular slots into that, or if that deck just hyper focuses on the 0/1 tokens that ping for 1 when you play non-creatures. But I have to believe that this guy is at least worth considering. At the very least, he's going to be absolutely nuts and Limited. I can't wait to try to draft a Black Waltz Wizard Tribal crazy shenanigans deck. It's going to be awesome. But next up, we've got Vaan Street Thief, the main character from Final Fantasy XII. He's a 2/2 legendary human scout for 1 red and 2. Whenever one or more scouts, pirates, and or rogues you control deal combat damage to a player, you exile the top card of that player's library. You may cast it. If you don't, you create a treasure token. That's some extra push there. The fact that if you're not casting the things that you're hitting off the top of their deck, you're getting treasure tokens, so no matter what, you're getting value, even if you can't play things. But then he has another line of text. Whenever you cast a spell you don't own, you put a +1/+1 counter on each scout, pirate, and rogue you control. So Vaan's really interesting. On the one hand, you want to play him in a deck that has as many different ways as possible to play things from exile, specifically play your opponent's things from exile, stuff like Cruel Claw's Heist or Devouring Dragon. Just there's all sorts of cards in Standard now that have come out a couple at a time over the last handful of sets that allow you to play spells from your opponent's deck. The new 𝐽𝐬 is another good example. You want to play as many of that stuff as possible so that you have a bunch of different ways of triggering that second line of text and getting counters on all of your creatures. But at the same time, you need to be playing a deck that's full of scouts, pirates, and rogues so that all of your creatures are actually getting those counters. So Vaan wants to be in a very, very specific deck that somehow takes both of those concepts and hybridizes them and cross-pollinates the synergies into one deck. And I have no idea what that looks like. It needs to be very specific, but if there are enough things that overlap their synergies in this way, I think this could be a pretty wild deck, even if you only end up, focusing on just scouts or just pirates or just rogues. Probably just pirates if I had to guess. I think you could make a pretty cool deck if you carefully balance the tribal aspect with things that are letting you play your opponent's cards. And Vaan could just be awesome in a deck like that, so I'm hoping it exists. Outside of that, it's really, really hard to evaluate this card and to know just how good it is because the requirements to trigger it are just so specific. But at the very least, he tacks in, he gets you stuff to play. If you don't play him, you get treasures. If you do play him, he puts a counter on himself at the very least, right? Even if you're not able to pull off the deck. So even in that situation, he could be pretty good. He's probably still worth running in Limited. But is he good enough to build into a deck unless you're building the deck around him in Standard? Probably not. Next up, we've got Hope Estheim, a 2/2 legendary human wizard with lifelink for 2 mana in the colors of Azorius. Hope is from Final Fantasy XIII, and he looks way cooler here than he does in that game, which is kind of funny. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent mills X cards, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. This is such a double-edged sword. Like, there is a part of me that's like, this is so cool. We have another awesome payoff for life gain decks, because I love life gain decks. Just keeping yourself alive with an insane amount of life while you go off on triggers that trigger off life gain constantly every turn, and building up a crazy board state from it is really, really nice. If your opponent, deals with your board state, you have so much life that you have time to recover. And I just love that aspect of life gain decks. And just seeing another payoff for life gain decks that wins in a completely different way than you would expect from a life gain deck is really refreshing and interesting. But on the other side, the fact that we're getting more support for Mill makes me cringe, and I hate it. I absolutely hate Mill so much, and there are so many cards coming that are going to turn Mill into a tier 1 deck. Do I think that this card's going to be a part of that deck? Probably not. Probably not. The fact that he requires life gain to go off is kind of a hoop to jump through. Then again, there could be a ridiculous combo out there where it's super easy to just mill your opponent's entire deck by gaining a whole bunch of life all at once with this guy out. So I could see it going either way, and either way it goes, I'm cringing. I don't like it. I hate mill decks, but for those of you that love it, mill's coming in a huge way, and Hope might be a part of that. I have no hope. Next up, we've got Ninja's Blades, an artifact equipment with job select for 1 black and 2. So when you play it, it's going to make a 1/1 hero token and then become equipped to it automatically. Otherwise, you can use the Mutsu no Kami ability and equip it for 2 colorless mana. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, is a ninja in addition to its other types, and has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card, then discard a card. That player loses life equal to the discarded card's mana value. This card's just nuts in Ninja Tribal. The newest Kaito is going to work super well with this because we don't have a ton of ninjas to use with that Kaito. And this just lets you turn any of your creatures into a ninja to take advantage of those Ninja Tribal synergies, which is awesome. But also the fact that you don't have to necessarily hit a really expensive spell on the top of your deck in order to make your opponent lose a lot of life, because it's a loot ability. You're drawing and then discarding a card of your choice. So you can just choose to keep a really expensive card in your hand for multiple turns until you finally get to attack with this guy and trigger, and then it's just sitting in your hand waiting to be discarded. That way you can do a whole bunch of damage in one fell swoop to your opponent. It kind of, in a way, feels like a build your own, what's that guy's called? Oh, why can't I remember the name off the top of my head? The 3-drop assassin. That's a 2/3, and when he hits, you lose half your life. I use the card in a ton of decks. It's in standard right now, and for some reason I'm blanking on the name. So if you remember, let me know. But this feels like almost like a build your own version of that card in a way. Because as long as you're holding up the right kind of cards in your hand and not playing them, you could be doing a ton of damage, and your opponent could potentially not even see it coming, and they can't just kill the creature to stop you, because you just equip it to another creature and keep doing it until you finally get through, which I love. So there is a lot to love about Ninja's Blades. It's pretty nuts, but we've got even more crazy cards to move on to. Clives Hideway, the next card. This is a land town, taps for a colorless mana, and has Hideaway 4, so you look at the top 4 cards of your library when it enters, and exile one of them face down, put the rest on the bottom of the library in a random order, and then at any time you can pay 2 mana, tap it, play the exiled card without paying its mana cost if you control 4 or more legendary creatures. I feel like this is the best Hideaway card that we've got in so long, simply because the criteria to fulfill it, to be able to play this for free, is so easy to hit as long as you're building around the deck properly. Having 4 legendary creatures in a deck that's going super deep into legends, maybe it's a Joda legendary tribal deck or something like that, should be pretty easy to pull off. And with this set being so heavily invested in legendary creatures, even having a ton of legendaries at uncommon so that you can fit all of the characters from all of the different Final Fantasies, I feel like standard is going to have even more ridiculous gas for legendary decks in general. And I feel like all of those legendary decks are just going to auto-include Clives Hideway. It's important to note that you're not even wasting a card. This is still a land that still taps for mana, does the thing you need it to do while you're curving out, and then you get the Hideaway thing for free. So it's not like the other Hideaway cards where you have to play a card that costs mana, that uses up a card. This is just a land that's doing the land thing anyway, so it's almost like you're not spending a card to get that Hideaway card like you do with some of the other Hideaway cards. So if you are in the right deck where you can include this, I think it's going to be a slam dunk. I think it's going to be absolutely nuts, super powerful, and we absolutely have to build a legendary deck as soon as this set drops. In fact, we'll probably build a few of them. I think legendary humans is going to be very viable, but I wouldn't be surprised if some other kind of legendary deck ends up being viable in standard, just because there's so many legends coming in Final Fantasy. Next up, we have Robon Bull of Ala-Mhigo, one of the coolest characters from Final Fantasy XIV. If you know how he lost his arm, it's pretty epic. I'm not going to spoil it here for you, but I highly recommend you play that game, even if you're not into multiplayer games or MMOs. It's just, you could play it single player, and it's the best Final Fantasy has been single player since the old school Final Fantasies, in my opinion. And all of the multiplayer stuff is just extra. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole again. Robon is a 2/2 legendary human warrior for 1 red and 1. Whenever he attacks, you attach up to 1 target equipment you control to target attacking creature, and he also has ward, pay life equal to Robon's power. This card is awesome, and I think we are finally getting to the point where we have enough cards that hyper synergize with equipment to make it truly viable in Standard. This gives us another way to freely attach an equipment without paying the equip cost, on top of some of the other ways we've gotten, but this is definitely the cheapest way by far, and probably going to be the most utilized out of all of them. But this, in conjunction with some of the other cards we've seen, such as Beatrix, and there's a few others I can't really remember off the top of my head, I really think it allows you to play some really expensive, crazy equipment and just go completely ham with them. The best part about this card is the ward is nuts. If they try to kill Robon with some sort of targeted removal, you could respond by playing like Monstrous Rage, and now all of a sudden Robon's like a 5 power creature and they have to pay 5 life in order for that spell to resolve. You could use this in some kind of crazy aggro equipment deck that also holds up some instant speed interaction like that, and just totally catch your opponent with their pants down. Just kill them super fast, not only with your aggression, but also with ward tricks, or at least put them in a position where they have to let their spell fizzle and can't pay the life because they've lost so much life to you being so aggressive. So I feel like Robon is really gonna be nuts. I feel like maybe he might even be a sleeper. I think people are so used to equipment being not good enough that they're gonna overlook this card. I also think that they see the ward, and without thinking about all of the different ways you can utilize that, just see it as pay 2 life. I think overlooking both lines of text from this card is going to be a disservice, and I think people are going to sleep on this card because of it. I think equipment's going to be super real. I think this card is going to be a very important part of it, and we are absolutely going to build that deck. But next up we have Balamb Garden Seed Academy, and this land gives me hope that we might actually be getting a rare cycle of dual lands in this set. We haven't seen any yet up until now, and we're like 2 weeks deep into spoiler season. Granted, this is a longer spoiler season, it's about 3 weeks long, but still, we finally have a rare dual land. This is Balamb Garden Seed Academy. It's a land town. It's a land town. It does enter tapped, and it taps for 1 green or 1 blue, so it's got the colors of Simic. But you can also pay 7 mana in the colors of Simic, tap it to transform it, and the ability costs 1 less to activate for each other town you control. So not only do we have a transforming town that is part of potentially a rare cycle of dual lands, which I hope I'm right about. It could be 5, it could be 10. This could just be a one-off, but I'm hoping that's not the case, and it probably isn't. But in addition to it counting as a town, working for town synergies, and transforming, and being a dual land, it actually is a town payoff itself. We're finally seeing a really good payoff for towns. I'm hoping there are more, obviously, but this one's pretty crazy. If you have 5 towns in play, and it counts itself as one of the towns. So, as early as turn 5, if you have 4 other towns in play, it'll only cost you 2 mana to transform it. And you don't have to transform it at instant or at sorcery speed. You can transform it at instant speed. You could do it at the end of your opponent's turn, for example, because when you do transform it, it requires you to tap it to transform it, but it comes back as Balamb Garden Airborne, a 5/4 legendary artifact vehicle with flying. It crews for only 1, and when it attacks, you get to draw a card. This is such a cool card. 2 mana potentially to flip this into a 5/4 flying win condition that can be crewed with almost any creature and draws you a card every single attack. I feel like this is another sleeper. I feel like the town deck's going to be really real, and if we just get a few more really good town payoffs to go alongside this and a couple of the other alright payoffs that we've already seen, that deck could be super real. I mean, just ramping out towns and then being able to transform stuff like this on your opponent's end step, and all of a sudden you're swinging with a ton of gas on your turn, could be nuts. Refilling your hand, they have to kill it or you draw a card. There's just so much you can do. And I'm super excited to see if this is actually a cycle, to see what the rest are like. I'm hoping against hope that it is a cycle. It'd be really weird for them to make a random dual land of 2 colors and not kind of balance that out. So I am expecting at least a 5 card cycle, possibly a 10 card cycle if they want to include the allied color dual lands as well. But we're going to have to wait and see. I'm excited to see if I'm right. But the last card of today is probably the craziest card in the set, and that's Gogo, Master of Mimicry, a 2/4 legendary wizard for 1 blue and 2. You can pay double X mana and tap him to copy target activated or triggered ability that you control X times. You may choose new targets for the copies. This ability can't be copied, and X can't be 0. Also, you can't target mana abilities. One thing I was talking about earlier when I was talking about this card in the spoiler short that I put out is the fact that you could use this with Vivi, because you could copy Vivi's mana ability that activates for 0 and makes you a whole bunch of mana based on the power of Vivi. That's not actually correct, because you can't copy mana abilities. So I got way ahead of myself with that. But I still think this probably goes in the same deck as Vivi, being able to make a ton of mana and also being able to copy all of your activated abilities that aren't that mana making ability and triggered abilities seems really, really good. And both of those cards work super well with Soul Cauldron, which is where I think this card is the most busted. If you can exile Gogo with Soul Cauldron and give all of your creatures this ability, potentially, if you're in the right deck where they all have counters on them, now all of your creatures can copy activated or triggered abilities, and it can get really out of hand. They can't just turn off your ability to do this by killing a creature. They have to kill all of your creatures or somehow get rid of your Soul Cauldron, and that could be really, really nuts. But even if we just use Gogo in a fair way, being able to copy literally any activated or triggered ability is absolutely bananas. You have sagas, you have the new summon cards that are saga creatures, all of those lore ability that triggers. You could dump all of your mana into triggering them a bunch of times instead of just once. That seems kind of insane. You have upkeep triggers. You could run this with Unholy Annex in the demon deck, and at the end of your turn, copy the Unholy Annex trigger. For every 2 mana you spend, you draw an extra card and drain for 2 if you have a demon out. A bunch of times. Like, there's just so many things you can use Gogo with. And I'm super curious. This is like the one card. I'm super curious what your thoughts are and how you want to use Gogo, and what are the craziest activated and triggered abilities that you can think of that you'd want to use with this guy. Because I feel like out of all of the cards we've seen so far, this one has the absolute most insane potential, the highest roof of ridiculousness that you can get up to. And I'm really, really curious, especially in Standard, but even outside of Standard, in Commander, in older formats and stuff. Let me know your thoughts on what you'd want to pair with Gogo, because I think this card along with the Vivi card are probably going to be the 2 most powerful cards in the entire set. I think Sephiroth is pretty up there. In fact, I'm really looking forward to getting to my top 10 for this set. I think that video is going to be wild. Once everything has been spoiled, I will make that video. I'll do my top 10 of what I think the best cards are. I'm excited to get there, but I would be very surprised if Gogo doesn't make that list. He just seems absolutely insane, and I'm super curious what you guys would use him with. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thanks so much for checking it out. I would appreciate it if you smash that like button really quick. It helps so much more than you could ever understand. And please subscribe so you never miss an upload. More spoiler content is on the way. I got some deck techs on the way. We're doing early access, which I can't tell you the date yet, but it is coming soon. We are doing a 24-hour marathon stream using all of the cards from Final Fantasy, brewing the most ridiculous decks possible. And that's going to be days before that set is available to the public. So if you're interested in checking the set out early, and more importantly, if you're interested in giving me ideas for decks that I should build, stuff that you want to see early, so that you can decide if it's worth building that stuff yourself when the set drops on Arena, definitely let me know in the comments. I'm super excited about brewing. I can't wait for early access, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck techs, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.